All right. Well, I'm proud to be up here as a woman of steel. So thank you. That's what our associate member. And I also want to tell you, I just came back from Minnesota yesterday, and despite the reports, Minnesota is no longer colder than Mars. I don't know if you heard that, that Range Rover up there was at a particularly warm part of Mars, and one day, about 3 weeks ago, the temperature that registered from the Range Rover was actually warmer than International Falls, Minnesota. So, but we are out of that now. And I do bring you greetings from our state, where in the words of our poet laureate, Garrison Keillor, right? The women are strong, the men are good looking, and all the steel workers are above average. All right, way above average. We have, I know that my friend Mr. Melander is out there, a great union leader in our state. I also just was meeting with Leo Gerard, who I adore. Not everyone can say they adore Leo Gerard, but I do. He's such an incredible leader, and it's so good to be here with my friend Dave Foster. And Dave mentioned a bit about my background, that my grandpa worked 1,500 feet underground in the mines his whole life. When the mine shut down, he became a logger, and it gave me a real sense of the ups and downs of this kind of work, but also a sense of the need for public policy that supports these kinds of jobs, whether it's Made in America provisions in the stimulus bill and the transportation bill, or whether it's standing by our workers on increasing the minimum wage and making sure that everyone's got an opportunity. Now, part of this, thank you, part of all this, which you guys get and why you're here today, is about energy policy and how we make it work and how we make it create jobs in our country and also make it better for the environment. So I like to look back at what's happened since I got to Washington. I shouldn't even say that. It hasn't been the best 7 years. But I think that you know that it's been a difficult time. There's been probably my lowest moment was actually New Year's Eve, not this year, but the year before, when we had that fiscal cliff night where we had to vote till 3 in the morning on New Year's Eve. And probably the lowest moment, I remember it was midnight, that magical moment, right, on New Year's Eve. And I look to my left, I see Harry Reid. I look to my right, I see Mitch McConnell, every girl's dream, okay, on New Year's Eve. That was maybe the lowest point. The second being the shutdown, that wasn't that great either, and we lost a lot of jobs and money. Although one effect of the shutdown, I'll get to this later, is I do think that it created some momentum to get the budget done, to move forward on some things, because the American people actually had just about had it. And I think that we're in a little different place, but not where we need to be, and so I'm going to talk about how we move forward. But before I do that, I kind of want to go back on energy policy to talk about what I think were our sort of moments where the bad road was taken. And the first, of course, was after 9/11. You remember the country was united, and President Bush, remember, went to New York, and he stood there at that site, and we were all embracing our country. And I remember at that time he told people, I don't remember what he told people to do. He told them to go shopping. Okay, that's okay. But I truly believe in my heart that we could have moved forward on energy at that moment, and transportation and energy. He could have so easily made that argument that, we're dependent on some of these countries that are sponsoring these terrorists, right? And we're dependent on them for foreign oil. And instead of investing in these cartels of the Mideast, we should be investing in the workers and the farmers of the Midwest. And that's how we move forward as a country. And I am just convinced if he had said that at the time, however he wanted to get there with funding it, that about 80% of the people in the country would have said, sign me up, I want to be part of this. It was one of those moments where people were united. But we all know that didn't happen at that moment. Okay, now let's move forward. Summer of 2008, I was in the Senate then, and we were working hard on a few things. One is some better efficiency standards. I called it building a fridge to the next century. It's kind of hard to make energy jokes, okay? So we were working on these efficiency standards, And we got higher gas, higher gas mileage standards, which was a victory. And I still remember standing there at the press conference. This was Politics 101 for me about Washington, D.C. I'm standing there, and we are embracing and cheering on that we had gotten this bipartisan compromise done on the gas mileage standards. And I was brand new. It was my first press conference, and I was on the Commerce Committee. I am on it, and that's how we got the agreement. And so I get to the microphone. I go, well, you know what? It's been so long since we've increased the gas mileage standards. It hasn't happened since I was in junior high. And then the next senator went up to the microphone and said, I was there when we last increased the gas mileage standards. So that was the last time I did that on the Hill. But the point of it is that we got that done. That was a victory, but we fell one vote short. This was the next error after the Bush moment of passing a renewable electricity standard, which I always thought was a smart way to go in terms of creating incentives, as you'll see in a state like Minnesota, where with the Republican governor, Governor Pawlenty, and a bipartisan group in the House and the Senate, we were able to overwhelmingly pass one of the most aggressive renewable electricity standards in the country. And in fact, we have encouraged and incentivized so much more wind and solar. At the same time, our economy has actually gotten stronger, even through the downturn. Now, our unemployment rate's at 4.6% in Minnesota. Just to give you a sense of how you can have a strong, I meant it when I said the steel workers were way above average, okay? You can have a strong renewable standard, and you can still have a strong economy. So I really viewed that as a failure on our part when we fell one vote short of breaking the filibuster. That was at a time where we could have gotten it done. Now, the third moment was actually when President Obama first came into office, geared up in the middle of the downturn. You all remember it was like January of that year when he first took office. We had lost more jobs in this country than there were people in the state of Vermont, to get you a sense, and that's why we worked on the stimulus bill and moved a lot of things forward. But one of the things I think we could have done, and that he had said he wanted to do right when he got in, was again that renewable electricity standard. Because remember, we were only one vote short of breaking the filibuster, right? Only a year before, when our numbers were worse. And our numbers had improved of people that would support it. And then we also had the House. And I think we could have easily gotten that done at that time, and it would have been one of those long-term incentives that I think would have made a major difference for the country. We could have done it regionally with different standards for different regions, but instead we waited, remember, and we decided to go forward with cap and trade. Now, I supported that out of committee. And I think the seeds of the idea of using market forces to create those kinds of incentives were good. But as you all remember, in the middle of that downturn, there were some real issues expressed with how that would interact with the economy and the costs and other things. And it just basically died in the Senate after having passed the House and passed actually our environmental committee. So that's the sad story, where I think we had this amazing moment when Bush was in to do whatever we needed to do to become more energy independent and help the environment. I think we had another moment when we had that vote and we were so close. And then the third moment was when Obama first came in and we had the House and we could have moved on a renewable electricity standard and other things. So where does that take us now? Well, I think the next moment is now, right? It is in the next year. It is through this election. Harder time to get things done, but then immediately after that, as we're starting to see people more and more concerned about environmental issues, with this incredible extreme weather we're seeing, with the hurricanes, with the drought in California, with concerns on the coast, concerns in the Midwest about tornadoes, and I just think you start to see a growing interest in the climate change issue. That coincides, of course, with your major focus, which is why I love the Blue-Green Alliance, on jobs, and we're already starting to see the positive effects of the new energy and jobs. So as we look at Washington and we move forward from that lovely New Year's Eve I spent, reasons to see some glimmer of hope. One is we finally got a budget done. We replaced half the sequestration cuts. We have to do more there in terms of not using these hammers, which affect the lives of working people in very big ways. The second thing is that we got the Farm Bill done, which the president, I was there with him in Michigan on Friday when he signed that bill into law. And it also includes some major, major victories for renewable energy. And we finally fully fund the energy title. We were able to maintain the entire $880 million that was in the Senate version. I had an amendment with Senator Hoeven of North Dakota, Republican, that added $100 million more for energy that also got included in the final bill. And the idea here is that we move forward only when we're willing to invest, like you've seen in some of these other countries. Anyone that flies over Germany and sees these solar panels, right, that workers installed and that people get better energy from on all these houses, they were willing to invest. Whether it's a seat cushion made from soybeans for a car manufactured in Detroit or new bio-based plastics that offset demand for foreign oil, we know that if we have the right policies in place, that clean manufacturing is going to create jobs, and not just on farms, but also in cities across America. Another reason I'm optimistic, this has stalled out for now, but the Shaheen-Portman energy bill, which was supported by the AFL-CIO and the Chamber of Commerce, doesn't happen all the time, and it's not like this is the panacea to everything, but at least these two strong senators came together, came up with some ideas to move forward on energy efficiency. As I said, it stalled out because of gridlock problems, but I'm almost sure it's going to come back and we can get this done. And so when I look at the budget, the Farm Bill, and the potential of moving forward on Shaheen-Portman, it's not everything, but it shows some forward momentum that we didn't have before. I see this idea of energy and what you're doing with the Blue-Green Alliance as really part of a competitive agenda for this country. It's a simple idea that we can't afford to be a country anymore that just makes its money by churning money on Wall Street. We tried that once, right? Didn't work that well. We respect our financial industry. It's an important part of our economy, but it can't be the basic foundation of our economy. The basic foundation of our economy has to be a country that makes stuff again, that invents things, and that exports to the world. That's the basic foundation of our economy, where we go from here. So what does this mean when it comes to the energy economy and it comes to jobs? Well, first of all, it means, and I know your last panel was talking about this, that we have to have a transportation network that's built for this century and the next century, not for the last century, right? If we want to move forward and be this economy that actually makes stuff and exports to the world instead of all the ships coming toward us, we want them to go that way. We have to have locks and dams that are upgraded and work. We have to have trains that work, that aren't exploding in the middle of North Dakota. We have to have a highway system that works and bridges, and no one knows this better than me. I live 6 blocks from that bridge that fell down in the middle of that summer's day in the middle of Minnesota. 8-lane highway, 6 blocks from the house. Highway that I bring my daughter over every single day. And I said that day, a bridge just shouldn't fall down in the middle of America. But you know when it does? We rebuilt it, and we got that thing done in less than a year in Minnesota. And as a result of that terrible tragedy and dozen people dying, 55 cars in the water of the Mississippi River, we really looked at all our bridges and found severe structural problems in our state and made some changes. And we were actually able on the statewide basis to get a gas tax increase to help fund some of those infrastructure changes because of what happened. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, inefficiencies in infrastructure are expected to drive up the cost of doing business by an estimated $430 billion, and that's just in the next decade. One of the bills that you maybe have talked about today is this idea of an infrastructure bank, or as some call it, infrastructure financing. I'm one of the original co-sponsors of the bill. Senator Warner is leading the effort. It's a bipartisan bill. And it would serve as a complement to existing infrastructure funding. The idea is to leverage public and private funding to build major infrastructure projects. I'm also working with Commerce Secretary Pritzker and Secretary Kerry on reforming our export control system. That's something else that gets us to where we need to be with exports, which is allowing more things to be off this list that are banned as exports. You understand why you're not going to send fighter jet planes to certain countries, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't send nuts and bolts to countries. And as we look at this decrease in investment in some of our defense industries, we have to look at ways we can keep those jobs strong. And part of the way we keep those jobs strong is by exporting more and more things. And once again, it leads us back to the infrastructure and having the infrastructure in place. So I talk about infrastructure of immediate jobs when stuff is built, that's clear. But I also talk about infrastructure in terms of our whole economy as a way to get goods to market. And that's what, I know you do that as well, but it's really important as you look at the bigger need for these roads and bridges and for our locks and dams. Second part of the competitive agenda, which you can feel right here in this room, is investment in our workforce training. This is a simple idea of science, technology, engineering, and math coming back strong in our classrooms. I have another bill to double the number of STEM schools, again with Senator Hoeven of North Dakota. Minnesota and North Dakota, we share the cold and we get along well. But we have to try to have more kids go into science, technology, engineering, and math. I've been in some incredible schools. One of my favorite was class that was, because as you know, with the modern equipment that we have right now, it's really hard to have it in high schools. And that's why a lot of this is trying to work with the community colleges and the 1- and 2-year degree technical schools so these kids can get some of this training in high school so they won't just drop out of high school, so that they'll go into these fields or they'll go into them immediately after high school. And making it cool and understanding that manufacturing floors are no longer dark, dirty, and dangerous, that the world has changed and that manufacturing is a very, very positive career. I went to this one school in the suburbs of Minneapolis, and these kids were just so focused on making their project, which was an automatic pool ball sorter. So when the pool balls came in, they would automatically sort in the right way. And I remember it was very complicated, and they're all proud of this thing. And I finally said to them, "This is such a cool thing you guys have made. Do you think you could ever sell it?" And this kid goes, "Well, it's kind of a limited market." And I said, "Well, who would it go to?" And they said, "People who have everything." But the point of that story was not the automatic pool ball sorter. It was the fact that these kids were excited about science and technology and engineering and math. Of course, a piece of this is to make sure we increase the minimum wage, something that we are working very hard to do in the Senate. I held a hearing on the Joint Economic Committee with former Labor Secretary Robert Reich a few weeks ago, and the one number that came out in my mind that I will never forget is that the top 400 people in this country right now has the same amount of wealth as the whole bottom half of the country. Think about that. The top 400 have the same amount of wealth as the whole bottom half of the country. And as in Reich's movie, if you haven't seen it, it's really worth watching, a documentary. And he has a guy on, a CEO, has a lot of money, and the guy talks about how he buys jeans. And he says, "You know what, I'm really rich, but I really can only get like 2 or 3 pair of jeans a year. I have no need, no matter what I want, I only have that many jeans." And his point is, if people don't have enough money to buy jeans, the only way you can produce things in this country is if everyone has to buy at least 1 or 2 of them a year, whether it's a, whether it's a pair of shoes or a pair of jeans or any kind of gift they're going to get someone for the holidays. They have to be able to buy it when we're a 70% consumer-driven economy. And so I just think in my heart that increasing the minimum wage is not the only way out of this shrinking middle class, but it's a major part of it in addition to the training that we just talked about. And to get back on the training, they did a survey in our state, and in 2010, 40% of our manufacturers said that they had job openings that they didn't have people to fill with the exact skills. In 2012, it was up to 60%. And I don't blame the workers for this at all, right? I don't blame them at all. I blame our education system and the way we failed to invest and make clear what the needs are. And so I just see this as a part of the solution, not the only solution, but hooking people up with those right kind of degrees and getting them retrained and getting the kind of training they need to fill those jobs. Okay, the third last part of this competitive agenda is how going green can make our country more competitive. A group of more than 100 big companies, including Cargill, General Mills, Best Buy, 3M, they're all in my state, have created the Sustainability Consortium, and they're developing tools to measure and report on the sustainability of production across different countries and companies. Because one of the things that they're learning is the more energy efficient they are, the better they can compete. One example of this would be a little telephone company, because it's not just big guys, in Sabika, Minnesota, and they realized that their customers were having real problems because they were in what part of our state which I would call extreme rural. And so when a big storm would come in, then the energy went down, the power went down, they were in real trouble, they had no backups. So this telephone company decided to start selling sort of a solar wind turbine combination so that their customers could choose to buy that as backup. And they actually made a little business out of it, and we're doing pretty well. And they sold a bunch of them to farmers. And all of a sudden, this one guy came in. He said, you know what, I love this thing so much, I decided I want to do my whole house in wind and solar, and I want you guys to come in and I'll pay you, I want you to do it. And they go, well, okay, sir, we'll do it, and it'll take like 10 years, though, for you to get the investment back. We just want you to know that if you're doing your whole house. It'll be worth it, but it'll take 10 years. He goes, no problem. They said, sir, do you mind if we ask you how old you are? Because you seem pretty old to be making this investment. He says, I'm 87, but I want to go green. And so I just think that the more people realize the long-term value of this, the more we're going to see it, but not if we just stay in the past. As we transition to the clean energy economy, and I think you know this, what the whole focus today is, we need to build wind turbines in Texas and not in Taipei. We need to build solar panels in Pennsylvania and not in Prague. And we need to build energy-efficient engines in Ohio and not in Okinawa. Those countries can build stuff, that's great, but we want to be building them here in America. According to the Department of Energy, over the last 7 years, global investment in the clean energy sector has grown fivefold to over $260 billion. And that's why I was one of 5 senators that sent a letter to the Department of Commerce Secretary in support of the Manufacturing Extension Partnership that has funded Blue Green Alliance's Clean Energy Manufacturing Center. Because this is what we need to do. It's about labor, private industry working together to boost clean energy manufacturing. It's what made this country great when you look back in time when we partnered together, and this is our opportunity to do it now. So we know that energy innovation can't take root, not in any kind of a serious way, without certainty, stability, and a clean path forward. You in this room get this, and you know how frustrating it has been to have policies play red light, green light, wind energy investment stops because you don't know if the wind energy tax credit is going to be extended or not, and it happens year after year after year. But you also know that these policies can make a difference. So for me, I think what Congress needs to do is just sort of the boring work of making sure it's stable, as we've done with this last budget, but now we need to do it with the tax code. So we send these stable incentives to businesses. What we just did with the Farm Bill, those farmers now have a 5-year window. Some of it's in energy, but they have a 5-year window about knowing how to invest. We need to do the same with our other industries, right? With wind and solar and energy, and send that clear signal that we support this all or above energy approach, and that we're going to put our money where our mouth is and put those incentives in place to get it done. We need a comprehensive national blueprint for energy policy in this country, one that gives those incentives and makes it very clear the direction that we're going. Now, I want to end as I started. That's with my grandpa. I told you he was a miner and that he was a steel worker, and actually he worked in the mines for a very, very long time. He was 15 years old when his parents died, and he had 7 kids younger than him in his family, and he and his brother quit high school, and went to work in the mines, and they kept that whole family together. The little one had to go to an orphanage for a year, and then she came back, and that's how they raised that family, and they kept them together. And he would always dream, with that hard life, the joy that he would have would be hunting and fishing, and he would just dream of that all the time down in that mine, and picking blueberries. And he would always pick these blueberries in these big, big pails and bring them home, and my grandma would make this blueberry jam. And then I was just talking to my dad, who's 85, and I'm trying to get him to tell me his whole life story, which is quite wild. And one of the things he told me that I didn't know 2 weeks ago was they didn't have a car, but pretty soon one of the relatives, one of the uncles, got a car. And so every summer they would divide it up with all the siblings, and everyone had a weekend. And my grandpa would use that car to bring my dad and his brother and my grandma to see Lake Superior and to see Gooseberry Falls, and to be able to see the wondrous, huge waterfall coming down that, you know, they thought was as big as Niagara Falls, even though it was Gooseberry Falls. And I thought about that as I was coming and getting ready for today, because that was our Blue-Green Alliance, right? my grandpa working in the mines, but loving the outdoors and knowing that that was such an important part of his life. And that was my background. And I stand before you literally the granddaughter of an iron ore miner, the daughter of a newspaperman and a teacher, and the first woman elected to the Senate in Minnesota. So I believe that these dreams can happen and you can get these things done. And I also believe that we can bring these interests together on the green side and the blue side as long as we do it in a smart and pragmatic way. So we can have the beauty of that summer's day where my grandpa's out picking blueberries, and we can have the jobs that sustained our family and allowed me to stand before you today. So thank you for your work. Keep it up and let's get it done. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.